Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts, when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
And welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Don Neuen, and I'd like to be the first to welcome you to this week's riveting episode of Cowboy Logic Radio. Boy, have we got a big show for you.
As usual, we always do every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time to 11 Eastern Time.
You know, Donna,
on our
there's
various affiliates found at Talk America Radio.
Oh, you're going to read the affiliate list.
CowboyLogic.us.
That's not an affiliate.
WDDQ, Talk 92.1 out of
What are you doing, Donna?
Georgia.
What are you doing, Donna?
I'm reading our list of affiliates.
Yeah, but I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
All right, so here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Let me be the first to formally welcome you to the big Cowboy Logic radio show this week. Boy, have we got a big show for you. Listen, on a very serious note, ladies and gentlemen, I must tell you, Nunberg. Who
is he? Who is Sam
a Nunberg? Where'd this guy come from, Donna?
I had a Nunberg once, but I put some lotion on it and it went away.
You know, I have heard that if you apply a small amount of a salve, a balm, or even an ointment, you can get rid of those unsightly Nunbergs.
No, it's
Where did this guy come from?
I never heard of. I've watched politics all the time. I never heard of half of these people that Robert Mueller dredges up just to try to divert attention away from the real story, which is you, Robert Mueller. You are the real story. You are the one that delivered uranium samples to the Russians. You were FBI director when all this crap went down, but no, we have to look now.
Nunberg.
Sam Nunberg.
Nunberg. What is a Nunberg? Is it a big floating nun out in the middle of the ocean?
No.
Oi, Captain!
He's a nothing bird.
Over there on the starboard side, I see a large floating Nunberg.
Is that
We've run aground.
Was that the alternate name for the SS Minnow, the SS Nunberg?
No, a Nunberg is a floating object in the ocean.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. You didn't know that?
No, I didn't.
It is.
Okay.
Do you know why?
No, why?
Iceberg.
Oh.
Nunberg.
I get it. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm a
there you
little
go,
slow.
Donna.
It's a
My
little bit
humor
late.
once again eludes you.
Right over my head.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get real serious here. We would like to recognize our valued affiliates and digital flagship stations.
There are plenty bergs there, not Nunbergs, plenty bergs.
But most importantly, we would like to acknowledge and appreciate our valued listeners.
Yes.
You.
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, so our digital flagship network is Talk America Radio. You can find that at talkamericaradio.us.
I said that.
I know, but I'm the one that does this, Donna.
Okay.
Thanks to Ron Phillips
Ron
and the
Phillips.
entire staff of no one other than Ron Phillips at Talk America Radio. You know, he works his fingers to the bone.
Yes, he does.
And we do appreciate Big Ron. Mm-hmm. But we've also got some terrestrial affiliates, ladies and gentlemen. And for those of you that have never listened to our show before, nor would know what a terrestrial affiliate is, that would be your standard AM/FM radio station. WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM, serving South Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, serving North Florida. We've got Scott James and Jack Ring down there, and boy, do we appreciate what they do. Mm-hmm. And then our very own hometown radio station, WLBB News Talk 1330 AM and 106.3 FM, serving West Georgia and Eastern Alabama. Steve Graddick and the whole family out there at WLBB, We sure do appreciate all the work you do. But more than these fine human beings that we've just mentioned are all of the nameless, valued listeners. And we do value you, ladies and gentlemen. You are why we do this.
And by the time the show is over, you will learn what a Nunberg is.
Aye, Captain. Floating out starboard appears to be a random Nunberg. Please miss it. Don't go ashore or aground. Do you run aground in a ship?
You could run aground.
Do not run aground on that unsightly Nunberg that we see starboard side, Captain.
All right. So, have you ever heard or seen a Sam Nunberg? Unless you actually are in his circle of friends, because I know
we used to have a senator named Sam Nunn.
Yes, that's true. But this is Nunberg. Okay? I've never heard of him.
I've never heard of him either.
He is a former Trump aide that nobody really heard of. He's been subpoenaed now by Robert Mueller.
He only had a first name.
Yes.
Sam. He's the guy like on Star Trek.
Well, that would be Sam Nunn.
Well, no. This guy, nobody ever heard of him. He's like the guy. What's the guy's name on Star Trek?
On Star Trek, the guy whenever you get beamed down and you're the extra person, the security guard, you know that guy's dead. He's history.
Yeah, because nobody knows his name. Kind of like Sam Nunberg.
What was the movie Galaxy Quest?
Yeah.
No, don't let me go down.
Nobody knows my name.
Nobody knows my name, so I'm going to die.
Yeah, for those of you that have never watched Star Trek, you have no idea what we're talking about, and you don't find any humor in this. Although, if you have watched Star Trek, this is funny as hell.
It is, and you'll get hooked on it. Anyhow, so he's a former Trump aide, nobody heard of, and he's been subpoenaed by Robert Mueller.
For unknown reasons.
In the best defense is a good offense posture, Nunberg went on a whirlwind tour of media outlets on Monday, attacking Mueller and current and former members of Trump's team and Donald Trump.
He wants to beat up Corey.
He wants to beat up Corey Lewandowski. He said Sarah Huckabee Sanders is fat. And he said, Donald Trump, I hate the guy.
I
wonder why he got fired.
He treated me like a son. He was a father-like figure to me.
Until he fired him.
How could he do that?
So
and then who was interviewing him, and they said, man, you smell like you've been drinking.
Somebody from CNN. But the Washington Post said Nunberg's been subpoenaed to appear, and he's defying the order. So Nunberg says, let Mueller, arrest me, he says to the Washington Post, declaring that he plans to defy the subpoena and corresponding request to hand over emails and text messages relating to the Trump campaign. I think this guy, Nunberg, was there for maybe a month and a half. This is Mueller just causing people to not be able to live their lives. He's just a jerk. Well, both of them
quite frankly, it sounds like Nunberg is too.
It's true.
But the thing is, what we need to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, are the famous trials that Nunberg took place in, the Nunberg trials.
Oh, honey, that's so bad. It's Nuremberg. Please, don't even go there. That's not fun.
Aye, Captain, off to the starboard side. Another Nunberg.
So he wants text messages and all this other emails, everything else relating to the Trump campaign and communications with current and former Trump advisors, including Roger Stone, Carter Page, and Steve Bannon.
But he's like Roger Stone's best friend.
So he says, Mr. Mueller should understand I'm not going to the grand jury on Friday, because he's supposed to go there this Friday. Do you think I would ever talk to that moron? Nunberg told CNN's Gloria Boyer.
And his reference was to Mueller?
Mueller, yes. Insisting in a later interview with Erin Burnett that he's not playing a game of chicken. Let him, Mueller, arrest me, Nunberg told CNN's Jake Tapper. So he's been all over CNN. Meanwhile, one of them said, are you sure you're okay? You smell like you have liquor on your breath.
I haven't been drinking. I'm taking my meds. Antidepressants, of course.
That was Burnett. Erin Burnett confronts him about rumors he'd been drinking or was medicated. I smell alcohol on your breath, she said. This is so. Let me just. This is like the Wizard of Oz. Yes, Mr. Mueller, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Let me just say one thing. Why doesn't he just talked to Julian Assange. That might make things interesting because that might implicate you, Robert Mueller. Meanwhile, the New York Times says a Russian hooker with 16 hours of recordings could shed light on Russian meddling. The plot thickens. Her name is Natalia Yasakovich. The escort, quote
They
unquote.
all are. They're all
true.
named that. Wasn't she in Bullwinkle? I seem to remember her from Bullwinkle when I was 5.
That was Boris Badenov.
Yeah, but what was the girl's name?
What I was thinking.
The lady's name.
It was Natalia something
Natasha.
or other. Natasha.
Yeah. All Russian women are named Natalia or Natasha.
I was thinking the same.
Bullwinkle? Were you? Hey, ladies and gentlemen, you only got 12 more minutes of this segment, but we're going to get down to business here before long. But aren't you having fun?
I can't read through my tears. I'm laughing so hard. So this escort, Natalia Yasakovich, said that she'd heard them. She would hand over her 16 hours of tape if she gets asylum from the U.S. There's only one problem. She's in jail right now.
Oh, I wonder if Mueller's going to subpoena Bullwinkle.
Anyhow, she said these tapes were made in 2016, and she's not saying who they're recorded with. So what does CNN do? Like Robert Mueller, we're going to follow this one. This is a
That's
big
the one they
lead.
need to follow right there.
CNN travels to Thailand.
Oh, is that where she is?
She's incarcerated in Bangkok. CNN is dispatching reporters around the world to find clues to get to the bottom of Trump's Russia ties. It's just hilarious.
CNN
It's so
is
stupid.
probably reviewing all previous archived Bullwinkle shows.
I'm sure.
What do you think?
They've sent reporters to Bangkok to speak with Natalia. But Natalia is also a self-described sex coach. I'm sure that's a reliable witness. And she's currently again in prison in Thailand and hopes that America will give her asylum in exchange for her Trump story.
Oh, I
You
bet
just
Bill Clinton
can't
would give her
make
asylum.
This stuff, yeah, I bet he would.
Jeez.
So CNN found this credible enough to send a reporter to cover the story. I have a novel idea. Talk to Julian Assange. Even Sean Hannity's been saying that. Hello?
I got to tell you, I think
source.
the one of the smartest decisions that you made when you left Fox and you moved down to Georgia was to not go talk to CNN.
Yes. Well, I actually sort of did. Just to feel
for
them
like
out.
15 minutes.
Yeah, and I was like, are you serious? No, I don't
And then
think so.
Sean
I'm not
Hannity
either.
asked you, well, what are you doing now? Why don't you go work for CNN?
And I gave
you
him this
went,
look like, hello, and he goes, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, I forgot you have some credibility. Hello? Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sean.
well, it was a compliment. He paid you a compliment.
It was.
He was doing the geographic thing.
Yeah, he was.
You're in Atlanta. Why don't you work for CNN?
Yeah,
and when was that? That was in 2000.
8 years ago, 9 years ago.
Yeah.
Unlike, other people that go from Fox back to
Don't
CNN.
name them.
Yeah,
Don't
I
name
won't
them.
do
They were
that.
friends of
There
yours.
have been a bunch of them. Anyhow, so this is the report.
Whoa, Captain, look over there. It's another Nunberg
Anyhow.
floating aimlessly in a body of water.
Try talking to Julian Assange.
And floating on the
Robert Mueller.
Nunberg happens to be Bullwinkle and his sidekick, Rocky the Squirrel.
Hey, by the way, do you know what actually happened earlier today, actually?
No.
Well, I can tell you. It's sort of no fun being an illegal alien, unless you're in California. Then
Or
it's loads
Chicago.
of fun because you get a lot of free stuff.
Chicago.
But
Any
DONNA,
sanctuary city.
yes, this is true. 1.8 million folks that Donald Trump offered to give a pathway to citizenship. Well, the Dems wouldn't buy it, and DACA has expired. Because, let's face it, it's no fun being an illegal alien. When you think about it, though, Donald Trump is brilliant as far as what he did with DACA, because he knew damn well all the Democrats do is complain. They don't want to find any kind of solution to anything. So he put it out there. He said, I'm going to give you exactly what you said you wanted. And what do they say? No, no. They're like the 4-year-old that says, no, 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 all the time. So what happens? He has exposed the Dems for what they are. And that is, they refuse to really want to get anything done. They just bitch and moan.
The Democrats are obstructionists.
Yes, this is true. It's too bad this isn't television so people could see what you're doing while I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm saying.
What was I doing?
Here.
What am I doing?
You took a guitar pick, and, you are a very good musician, but this must be like a guitarist goofy thing that you do, and sticking it on his forehead like it's Ash Wednesday.
This is just not any guitar pick, Donna.
Is that...
this is Vince Gill's guitar pick.
Really?
Yeah.
Vince Gill used that guitar pick?
See that?
Did he use that guitar pick? Ooh, let me touch that. Wow.
What's it got on there?
Vince Gill vibes. I don't know. I don't have my glasses on. It says VG.
That'd be Vince Gill.
Vince Gill.
Yeah.
Wow. But you were sticking it on your forehead.
Doesn't stand for Sam Nunberg.
No.
Or Bullwinkle the Moose.
Natasha.
What was her? Natalia.
Natalia.
The 16-hour hooker.
Exactly. Who's in jail now. And that's a credible witness. Where'd you get a Vince Gill pick from?
From Vince Gill.
When did you meet Vince Gill? Wow. I'm impressed.
You should be.
God, I love Vince Gill. Man, can that guy
See on the back of it? You see what it says on the back?
It says VG on the back, too.
No, it says Vince Gill on the back.
Oh, does it?
But I've worn it off because I actually used this pick.
Hey, what do you think's going to happen to Libby Schaff out there in Oakland, California?
What, for defying the feds?
Yeah, apparently
Probably nothing, to be honest with you.
One of them was a Mexican gangster that was deported 4 times. Assault with a deadly weapon, and they apparently avoiding police, whatever.
What's your point, Donna?
Well, it's multiple. These are guys who've been
You mean repeat
deported,
offenders that sanctuary cities are embracing and protecting?
Yeah. And Libby Schaff is giving them a heads up. And I want to just find out why. Now, apparently, it's not illegal for her.
How do you spell Schaff?
SCHAAF.
2 A's?
Yes, I believe, but I'm
That's
not
a
sure.
lot of vowels.
My question, I believe, and I was watching Judge Napolitano on Fox toward the end of last week. He was talking about this. She actually can't get arrested for this, but she can if it turns out that one of these guys does something illegal. Then she's going to be on the hook for it, and she's going to be in trouble. We'll so Benjamin.
So they can hold her accountable.
Yes, apparently.
Wouldn't that be nice if some of these people, I don't care whether you got an R or a D or an I or an S or an M or a C behind your name?
Yep.
Wouldn't it be nice if they just were held accountable? That if you and I did something like they've done, we would be imprisoned. Mm-hmm. We would be charged. We would be tried. We would be convicted.
Absolutely.
We would be sentenced. And we would be shipped off wearing orange suits.
This is true. Just like Robert Mueller should be. But that's just my opinion.
Hey, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you need to know that we do not use, in this half-Italian home, Mueller noodles. What do we use? What kind do we use? Begins with a B.
Barilla.
I was going to say
too.
Bartoloni.
Ronzoni, too.
Ronzoni.
I like Ronzoni pasta. Ronzoni.
And we use Bartoloni? Barbarella.
Barilla.
What's the gal that does
Barilla.
the TV shows in the morning?
That's Maria Bartiromo. She's
I wonder
Italian
if she's got
too.
noodles.
I bet she's got a lot of noodles. She does a great show.
She does.
She does do a great show.
But she doesn't sell noodles in the store.
No, she doesn't.
And what kind do we use that begins with a B?
Barilla.
Barilla?
Barilla.
I thought that was the kind of pad you used.
Hispanic.
When you're scrubbing pots.
No, that's Brillo.
Barillo.
Yes.
Barilla.
No, Barilla.
Barilli?
No,
How do you spell it, Donna?
I don't remember anymore. Barillo pasta.
But we just know what the box looks
and
like.
And Ronzoni. I got Ronzoni, too.
Ronzoni.
Right.
That's what I call Ron Phillips when I call him up
Do you?
sometimes.
You call
Yo,
Ronzoni?
Ronzoni.
Hey, the Oscars hit
I don't really do that, Donna.
ratings all-time low for the Oscars, down 16% from last year.
When was it on? Was it on a couple of nights ago?
Sunday, which was also way down from the year before. And along with the gender-neutral statues. Meanwhile, a man accused of stealing Frances McDormand's trophy. First of all, my question is,
who is Frances
exactly? Is it a
McDormand?
man or a woman? It's a woman. She won Best Actress, apparently. It's a she, although in Hollywood you never know. She apparently got the trophy twice. Once when she was awarded it, and the second time when she lost it and somebody else found it and gave it back to her. I mean, can you believe that? But I never even heard of this woman. Isn't that terrible?
Well, and the thing is, because you're a member of the Screen Actors Guild,
Yeah, I know.
we get tons and tons of complimentary DVDs at this time every year. They just come to us in the mail. I've never even heard of anything that we were sent. Nothing.
Well,
Except the Gary Oldman.
In fact,
what was the name of that movie?
Oldman, Finest Hour or Darkest Hour.
Yeah, they sent us that, and we watched
which
that.
was great because that was about Winston Churchill.
But you have to agree, when you put these things in the DVD player, ladies and gentlemen, because they're complimentary and they come to Donna before they, so that hopefully she'll vote on one of these people or one of these films, you put it in the DVD player and it comes up and it starts in and you have to agree that you're not
never
going
to sell it to someone else.
You got to click I agree, and then you can watch the film.
It was actually Gary Oldman who found this woman's Best Actress Oscar and gave it back to her later on that evening.
Where did she lose it?
She lost it
backstage
or
something.
She left it somewhere and somebody picked it up, and this guy actually stole
what
it.
What kind of a schmuck gets an Oscar and leaves it?
What kind of a bigger schmuck
I left it over there.
Steals it and
in the green room.
But steals it and thinks he's going to get away with it and posts it on, social media. So they pick him up and he's been arrested for felony grand larceny. His name is Terry Bryant. And Benjamin Netanyahu met with Trump on Monday. It was pretty cool, but Trump over the weekend was at the annual Gridiron Dinner. He didn't go to the Oscars. The Gridiron Dinner, I never went to it, but it's something like they kind of make fun of each other and themselves.
Well, it's like Trump, a roast.
Yeah, a roast, sort of. So he gets up there and he goes, sorry, I'm late. I'm late because Jared Kushner was having trouble getting his security clearance now.
And that's pretty funny.
And he said Rex Tillerson should smoke a peace pipe with North Korea. And Mike Pence is waiting for him to die so he can become president. I mean, you got to admit, Trump does have, with all this going on, he's got a heck of a personality. He really does.
All right, Donna, we got a big show. We got a serious show coming up. We got two fabulous guests. Please tell the listener who we've got coming up.
Funny you should ask, Don. We will be talking to a Dr. John Baker, who wrote a pamphlet, which everybody should get for just 99 cents on Amazon. It's called How to Get Illegals to Go Home. How to Get Illegals to Go Home. Imagine that. Dr. John Baker. And then at the top of the hour, we'll be speaking to Charles Ortel. He'll be giving us the latest on the Clinton Foundation investigation. It's all coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance. Yes, when cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
Let me talk to you, black people. When you vote for blacks and put them in office under the banner of the Democrat Party, please explain to me what black people get as a result. This was not a nap that we have been taking. We are in a coma. You know what the interesting thing about pensions is? That's today's money given to people who ain't doing nothing for you today. Get off that black Democrat tit that they've been sucking on. Your country is being stolen from you, and the promise is being stolen from your children, and they're telling you it's all right while the rest of the world is trying to lap us. Well, why are we doing so poorly? 2 words: teachers' unions. Are you kidding me?
Black Man Thinking, Monday nights, 9 p.m.
You cannot retreat to your safe spaces. There are no therapy poodles allowed, especially when facing the truth. And that's just how we like it. Straight, hard, conservatarian talk, on the rocks, no chaser. Served up on the Adrian Slade Show. Small, limited government, constitutional conversations, exclusively on Talk America Radio. Every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. on Talk America Radio Liberty.
This is Denise Simon. 18 hours a day, I live in a world as an intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. Intelligence analyst. What I find is reprehensible. What I find is terrifying. What I find is treasonous. 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 The mainstream media has completely failed the American people. 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 Join me for the Denise Simon Experience every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
You're listening to your local news source, WLBB, News Talk 1330 and FM 106.3.
Hey, everybody, they're back on again.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glares. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don Neuen. And our very special guest is making his debut appearance on Cowboy Logic Radio. His name is Dr. John Baker. He's a lawyer, and he's written a pamphlet that only costs 99 cents on Amazon. But it's kind of the go-to quickie guide for people that might be interested in this topic, and it's been in the headlines quite a lot, and that is how to get illegals to go home. I mean, this really is the bottom line. And the problem is, it is illegals, and therefore they've broken the law just coming here. But this is a go-to pamphlet that Dr. John Baker has written. And again, you can get it on Amazon. And Dr. Baker, let me just tell everybody a little bit about your background, too. As a lawyer, you're president and chairman of the Foundation for Self-Government, member of the Federalist Society. You've been a visiting fellow at all kinds of big places: Oxford, Louisiana State Law, adjunct fellow at the Heritage Foundation, distinguished scholar at the Catholic University of America Law School. You know, you taught at Tulane, George Mason, Pepperdine. I wonder if you saw Barack Obama when you were there. New York Law, Hong Kong U, University of Dallas, all over Europe, South America, Asia. Your website is selfgovfree.org, and on Twitter it's Dr. John S. Baker. Dr. John Baker, welcome to Cowboy Logic Radio.
Thank you, Donna and Don.
And you were right. Just before we started this interview, you did say that your resume is pretty much going to take the entire segment up, but it was pretty close.
Well, that's
right.
fine. He worked awfully hard to get that, so we need to let everybody know about that.
Okay, so your pamphlet, it's only 99 cents on Amazon, and it really is a go-to guide, how to get illegals to go home. Give us the gist of that, if you would, Dr. Baker.
Well, first of all, let me say I'm not speaking for any of the organizations that you mentioned. Secondly, I'm actually very much for legal immigration. Mm-hmm. The whole issue for me is legal versus illegal. And as I watch the debate in Congress and elsewhere, what frustrates me is that in addressing the so-called DACA and Dreamer problems, nobody has analyzed why we think about this. Back in 1986, when Reagan granted amnesty to 3,000 people, nobody was talking about young people. In 1996, nobody was talking about young people when Newt Gingrich and Clinton got together and put through a, quote, get tough policy on immigration. And if you look at the stats on the age of the Dreamers, the average age is 24 or 25. They came here after birth. Do the math. Virtually all of them came after 1996. So what happened? Why the change? Why the growth? And that's what I focus on. So if you don't understand the cause, which I want to explain, then you're not going to come up with a remedy that fixes the reason things. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Prior to 1996, what illegal workers did was to go back and forth between their countries and the U.S. They would go back to visit their families. They could do so because it was fairly easy to get in and out of the country illegally. After 1996, became more difficult. The so-called get tough legislation was not fully enforced, and it was not as tough as some people would like. But the reality was it became more difficult. That meant that illegal workers had to pay so-called coyotes to bring them across the border. These are human traffickers. And they quickly realized that they couldn't go back and forth paying that amount of money, several $1,000s each time. But what did they do? They decided to move their families up and pay for everyone once. That caused the explosion of illegals in the country. That's the reality that the Get Tough legislation in 1996 backfired completely. And nobody has recognized that. And until you address that problem, you can't change the situation, because once they get here, they have no incentive to leave because of another part of the law. That law says that if you've been here illegally, you can't come back legally for a number of years. So when many people say, just leave the country, get in line and come back legally, they can't do it. There's a bar.
Wow. And you know what? I'm speechless here because I didn't realize that. It makes total sense. And therefore, your pamphlet, which is called How to Get Illegals to Go Home, is so poignant because I guess to follow the whole chronological order of what's going on is exactly what's caused the problem we have today. Don has a question for you.
Dr. John Baker, I have a question, and it's real simple. Why is, in your opinion, and I've got my opinion on this as well, but why, in your opinion, is one half of our political party so interested in figuring out a way to keep all these people here? My answer is it bolsters their voter base. It bolsters the voter base. It also can start tipping that Cloward and Piven strategy that we're all so familiar with. But in your opinion, why is the Democrat Party so infatuated with people that are here illegally?
Well, it's very much tied to power and money. Most people do not realize that when the census occurs, they account in the population every person in the country, legally or illegally. What does that mean? Unfortunately, and I think unconstitutionally, we have been allocating seats in the House and therefore votes in the Electoral College based on total population. So California benefits from having many illegals, and in fact, California is getting several House seats and votes in the Electoral College that really belong to other states.
I agree. And why then, it befuddles me when I see individuals in states, especially sanctuary city states like Chicago and like San Francisco and Southern California, where you've got these people coming on and, talk show hosts like Tucker Carlson and the like will hit these people with questions like, why is it that, now how do you justify providing security, providing benefits, providing safe haven for people that are illegally here over the protection of those that are here legally or that are U.S. citizens. And these people, some of them are just normal citizens that are speaking out on this, legal citizens, and they're all for this. I don't get it. It makes no rational sense to me as a citizen of the United States, other than exactly what you said, creating an unconstitutional, false district and voting base.
And it's also that federal dollars are distributed on the basis of population.
Absolutely.
In most instances.
Absolutely. But the thing is, you, Donna, me, 99% of our listeners, when you go, hey, you think it's right to have people that are in our country illegally receiving, quite frankly, more benefits, more security, more protection than you as a natural-born American citizen are receiving? All of us go, no, that's terribly wrong. So if common sense is telling us that this is terribly wrong, how are these people, especially on the left, getting away with A, such unconstitutional practices, B, such practices that are so detrimental to the security of our country, and C, absolutely, lifting their thumb in the face of American citizens?
Well, it's a complicated thing, but they are clear on their mission. And some of the people opposing all of this are not as clear on the mission. That is, I'm opposed to illegal immigration, but I'm for legal immigration.
So am I.
Some of the groups fight. Yeah, but some of the groups with the most power fighting illegal immigration also want to reduce legal immigration. And that makes it very difficult to come to a reasonable solution to the problem.
Well, I agree with you on that.
Because you're going to get people to go out of the country, you have to give them incentives. And I talk in the pamphlet about incentives. You've got to incentivize the people who are illegally here. That means they have to have a reason to think that, one, if they leave the country, they're not going to be barred from coming back legally. Two, you've got to open up in certain channels greater legal immigration as the illegals leave. You should make them related to one another, so you don't increase legal immigration unless the illegals have left. So you give those incentives. Importantly, you also have to incentivize Mexico in particular. And here I talk about how immigration should be tied to the question of trade with Mexico. Currently, President Trump is dealing with NAFTA, but no one is publicly connected trade with Mexico and immigration. Trump has said that he prefers bilateral or two-way trade agreements, not three or more countries involved in what are called multilateral trade agreements. If Trump would break the NAFTA negotiations and simply negotiate with Mexico and tie trade and immigration together, it would be a much better prospect for Trump and the U.S. Why? The bargaining power of the U.S. vis-a-vis Mexico is huge. Mexico runs a $63 billion a year trade surplus with the U.S., and most people may not know that Mexico profits from illegals in the country. Mexico receives $25 billion a year in so-called remittances, monies that Mexican nationals in the U.S. send back to Mexico. Mm-hmm. Any threat to those sources of income will cripple the Mexican economy. That is the bargaining wedge that President Trump has with Mexico.
How do we cripple the money that's going out? The last point that you brought up, the money that's going out of the United States back into Mexico to the tune of $25 billion.
Well, Trump talked about this, and most people don't realize it, but when he said he could get Mexico to pay for the wall, he specifically said, all I have to do is regulate and close down the remittance channels. These monies are sent often by Western Union, and under the Patriot Act, the president has power under the Know Your Customer rule to regulate that. He could regulate it in such a way that it chokes the money flow. But rather than simply rubbing Mexico's nose in it, if you wrap all of this into a treaty, you could allow Mexico to save face and make the president down there look good. In other words, good negotiators do it in such a way that both sides can claim a win. You can't simply defeat one side in a negotiation. But the other part of this is that changing the negotiating strategy and going from legislation to a treaty gives the president greater power. How? Right now with the Senate, he can't even get more than 39 Republicans to vote with him for his plan. He'll never get to 60 at that rate, and senators know that they are in the driver's seat. When you move to a treaty, everything changes. Why? The president negotiates that. Whatever treaty he presents to the Senate, he has to figure that they will approve it, but they don't really get to change it. It's an up or down vote. If Mexico agrees to a treaty, they want the treaty. How are people in the Senate going to vote against that? They've been claiming that they're protecting illegals mostly from Mexico, and yet they're going to vote against a treaty that Mexico needs and wants.
That makes total sense. And this way, like you say, you can kind of have an end run around Congress because the Republicans, as I've said so many times, shoot themselves in the foot or partake in a circular firing squad while the Democrats circle the wagons. We're talking to Dr. John Baker, who is a lawyer, and he's taught at so many different colleges. Plus, he wrote a pamphlet called How to Get Illegals to Go Home. You can get it on Amazon for just 99 cents, and it really is, in a nutshell, exactly what President Trump ought to heed. And hopefully somebody can get this to the administration. Dr. John Baker, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on just this latest thing that Trump did as far as supposedly starting a trade war. That's what the left media is calling it. But trying to level the playing field with all these treaties, and how maybe this might be a good opening for that treaty you're talking about to renegotiate with Mexico.
Well, a lot of people have accused President Trump of protectionism. And I know people in the Commerce Department working for him, and they're not pursuing a protectionist agenda. It seems to me you have to look at particular actions. Insofar as China is concerned and putting tariffs on their steel, I'm all for that. Look, why should we be promoting the destruction of our steel industry and in favor of China? Would General Motors outsource its production to Ford if Ford would agree to do it for less than General Motors could do it for? Steel is a strategic issue. We can't allow a very heavily militarized China that clearly wants to dethrone us as the chief power in the world. We can't allow them to have this advantage. And until Americans understand that we are really in a kind of war with China that is driven not at this point by weapons per se, but by theft of technology, by trade deals, etc., then we don't understand the threat, the external threat to the United States.
Yeah, that's true. Let's bring things a little closer to home vis-a-vis this treaty, or I should say this the sanctions that Trump just put on. And one of the biggest exporters, I guess, of steel and aluminum is to our neighbor to the north. And Canada is not happy about that whole thing. Is there some way, I mean, I guess Trump seems to be a bull in the China shop to some extent. And he is a New Yorker, being from that area. I don't mind it. But to me, he's getting things done by basically kicking these, do-nothing Senate and congressmen in the backside to get them to do something to change. Because even with illegal aliens and with immigration and DACA, he has put something forward. It's almost, I think he's brilliant in some respects, because it's almost like he knew the Democrats wouldn't agree to it, because they're not going to agree to anything. So here he is saying, here, I'm trying to change things. Previous administrations all said they're trying to change things, and nobody's getting anything done, and he's exposing them for the frauds that they are. I'm not sure if there was a question in there or not, but go ahead.
I think it was, very telling that one of Clinton's advisors said that, Obama's advisors said that Trump is a very consequential president. What's interesting is that's what Obama wanted to be, but I don't think was. Look, love him or hate him, Trump is a force, and he's a deal maker. He has an instinct about how to negotiate and throw people off guard that nobody that I've ever seen in public office has been able to accomplish.
I would agree with that 100%.
Absolutely.
Dr. Baker, let's go back to your pamphlet and discuss the important need to get this information, especially into the Trump administration and preferably directly to Trump. How do you propose to do that? Yeah, how do you propose to do that, given the fact that the mainstream media obviously is not going to touch anything with a conservative bent or a, illegal versus legal immigration topic, but also given the fact of the hostility between the mainstream media and Trump, you've got to go to alternative media, social media. How can the warriors of alternative media and social media help you out in getting this message into the Trump administration?
Well, the most direct messaging system that the founders created was through your local member of Congress. So if at least one of your members listening to this program takes a copy of my pamphlet and hands it to a representative, their representative, and say, have you heard of this? Have you thought of this? That's the only way from the ground up that it's going to filter up.
All right, Donna.
Are you listening, Drew Ferguson?
Yeah. Let's go back to the website, the Amazon, the book title. Let's get that out. Ladies and gentlemen, get your pens and paper ready. And we're going to do this at least 2 more times before the end of this segment. So, Donna,
it's a pamphlet, so it's a quick read. It's just really a great way to try to hopefully wake up our lawmakers as how to get illegals to go home. That's the name of the pamphlet, How to Get Illegals to Go Home. You can find Dr. John Baker. His website is selfgovfree.org. That kind of says it all. Selfgovfree.org. And on Twitter, it's Dr. John S. Baker. Dr. Baker, talk a little bit about the situation with sanctuary cities and states. And this idiot lawmaker, what is she? The mayor of Oakland, California, Libby Schaaf, talking about how to actually tell illegals that ICE is coming and giving them a heads up. Not only does it cause problems as far as not getting these people arrested, but it can put a lot of people's lives at risk.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting question about federalism. Sometimes conservatives go and claim too much. That is, I want to start from the point of view that it is a federal responsibility to deal with illegals. And one, the federal government cannot force local government to carry out federal law. In fact, in the 19th century, the Supreme Court said local government could not carry out federal law. Now, we don't follow that anymore. But in order to get local government to carry out, they've got to agree to it, and many places have. So the fact that they don't want to carry out federal law, that's fine. But going from not carrying it out to obstructing it, that's a totally different matter. Whether or not it amounts to a criminal act, I leave that to federal prosecutors to decide. I'm not weighing in on that point. But I think that ultimately it is a political reaction that needs to be brought to bear. But on the other hand, the political reaction is not going to come from the city itself, because the mayor's not going to do this unless there's support out there. So next you would normally go to the state, but you're not going to get anywhere there in the state. So unfortunately, it is a situation where other states really have to express their outrage, or people in the media have to express their outrage. A lot of times, the most effective and the only way to bring about change is not through a legal action, not through a government action, but through the force of public opinion, and that's why shows like yours are so important.
Yeah, I agree. At what point, in your opinion, if you cared a way, to offer it on this, did this mayor move from ignoring or not necessarily complying with this federal mandate to obstructing it?
Well, first of all, I'm a former prosecutor, and one thing I don't do is give an opinion on something when I don't know all the facts. and too often that occurs in the public arena.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly all the details of what happened, and so I wouldn't want to offer an opinion.
And I appreciate and respect that. I'm not a federal prosecutor or a former prosecutor, and so I would submit that when she actually warned or told these illegal individuals about ICE movements, that would be the obstruction point. But again, I'm not expecting you to weigh in on it based on what you just said, and I respect that.
Well, I can give you a theoretical answer. Well, under state law, not federal law, under state law, someone can become what's called a principal to a crime without actually committing the crime by assisting the criminal either in advance, during, or after the fact. So that would be the basic criminal principle. How it's applied in this case or under federal law, that's what I don't want to comment on.
No, I got you. Okay.
Let's look at Fast and Furious then. If Barack Obama sold weapons to these drug cartels and then we have a DEA agent turn up dead. But I guess that's another story too.
Way to drop that in with 1 minute and 29 seconds to go.
Dr. John Baker, we only have a minute and a half left. Real quick, give us your take on the FISA court, if you would.
It's not a court. Look, a court in the Anglo-American tradition involves the adversary system. Even when police or prosecutors can get a search warrant without notifying the other side, later on there is a chance to test that warrant. There is no opportunity to test the FISA warrant. Calling it a court, I know because it involved a friend of mine who was at the time in Congress and working on the statute. I told him, this is not a court. He said, yeah, but it was the only thing we could do to get out of the mess we were in. That's what happens too often in Congress. They take, what appears to be the most expedient route to resolve a problem. And calling it a court and dressing it up with federal judges, I think, is a travesty.
Yeah, it is. And what's going on, costing the taxpayers now close to $40 million with Robert Mueller, is an even bigger travesty, given the basic anal exam, pretty much, that they've given the Trump administration, and still just won't even look at the obvious, and that is the Clinton Foundation and the DNC. But that is also another segment. Dr. John Baker, we're out of time. Everybody go to Amazon, find his pamphlet. It's a great go-to guide, how to get illegals to go home. Please send it to your congressman, and hopefully we can get this to the Trump administration. Find him on Twitter at Dr. John S. Baker, and that's Dr. John S. Baker, and the website, selfgovfree.org. Dr. John Baker, thank you so much for joining us here on Cowboy Logic Radio. And we'll be talking to about the Clinton Foundation coming up next with the latest going on, and that would be with one Charles Ortel. It's coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts, but their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance, yes. When cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts, when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don Neuen, and this is Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts, when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic, ladies and gentlemen. Let me be the first to welcome you back to this absolutely riveting episode of Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Don NEUEN, ladies and gentlemen. Back to you, Donna.
Oh, man. You didn't do that last hour because it was the first time we had to get the guest on. And
I don't ever do it.
Yes.
In the first time we ever interviewed. Well, I shouldn't say that. I have done that.
With our virgin guests.
Yeah.
Because at that point they would probably hang up and never talk to us again. But with Charles Ortel, that
Charles
is not
Ortel's
the case.
been ridden by Cowboy Logic more than the village bicycle.
Wait a second. I'm Don NEUEN.
How you doing, Don?
Hey, you know
I'm
what?
great, Don.
That fits really good because Charles Ortel, you were an imposter on To Tell the Truth.
That was my
you're pretty
first...
good at saying that. You could say that. I'm Don NEUEN.
And you do it quite convincingly to say so. Yeah.
And not only that, I got 3 out of the 4 votes.
Did you really?
I
so
did.
They thought you were the actual person?
They did.
Charles, was this television show in black and white or color?
Actually, I don't think it was. It was before there was sound. I think it was silent.
You were miming
subtitles.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back, Charles. You're absolutely, if not our most frequent guest, you are probably the longest running guest that I, Don NEUEN, haven't actually run off. But ladies and gentlemen, Charles is not only a frequent guest of Cowboy Logic Radio, but he's also a dear friend. We actually, when Donna and I went up to New Jersey for the Christmas holidays,
yep. Went into New York when it was 10 degrees.
Went into New York and hung out with Charles, had some coffee. And
froze our butts off.
And what was so cool, Charles, is during that conversation, unlike the radio interview conversations, you told us all kind of stuff we can't talk about. And I'm bringing that up only to just kind of feel cool about that.
Well, maybe eventually we can bring some of this stuff up, but
maybe,
not yet.
Maybe.
Okay, so let me introduce you formally here, Charles Ortel.
Oh, wait a minute. By the way, Charles, last night we had Chinese food.
Good. All right, yeah, we don't want.
That's an inside joke that the listeners have no idea why I just brought that up. But I feel like I should share this.
Mm-hmm.
We've got an hour. Are you okay with that, Charles?
Sure.
All right. Frequently, and let me define frequently. Every night, Charles will call the lovely Donna Fiducia sometime around dinner time. Mm-hmm. And he is calling to follow up and to check in with Donna as to what she is creating for that particular evening's dinner menu.
Because I'm Italian, and I really stink at cooking.
Now, I'm usually still at work and have not gotten home at that point. So they engage in a nice little conversation that usually discusses the Clinton Foundation, anything of, current event interest, but it always also includes what's on the menu for tonight, Donna. Well, last night, I don't think that you called.
No, actually.
I did call. You weren't there.
He actually
you did call
last night, but lately he's been a little remiss because he's been very busy doing this other stuff.
Well, he does have other things to do other than to follow up on Donna Fiducia's menu items.
But the thing is, I got Blue Apron. And I love Blue Apron. It's tanking stock-wise, I know, but it's still pretty good, and it's hanging in there.
Well, it's because FedEx can't figure out where to deliver the damn meals.
And by the time we get it, it's all melted away, and I have to get a credit from Blue Apron. But I happen to also know, then I asked Charles Ortel what he's having, and macaroni and cheese is pretty big on the menu.
Oh, man.
Are you a big mac and cheese guy?
I'm a huge mac and cheese. I'll tell you a funny story. A number of years ago, almost 20 years ago now, around 20 years ago, I was on the board of a great private company called Ariel Corporation. It's a family-controlled large company that makes a certain type of equipment used in natural gas fields, and very successful business. And they had bought the childhood home of the current generation who was running it, and they had turned it into a guest house in Ohio, in the small Ohio town where Kenyon College is. And they asked me if I wanted to be the first guest. And I was doing a lot of traveling all over Europe, all over the world, actually, and, constantly being taken to these fancy restaurants. And I just got to the point where the last thing I wanted was another fancy meal. So they were all excited, and they said, look, we've got a local chef. He's at the Kenyon Inn, and, he's going to not work that night, and he'll cook a meal just for you. What do you want? You can have anything you want. And I said, look, I don't mean to offend you at all, what I really want? You want me to tell you what I really want? And okay. I said, I want Kentucky Fried Chicken and macaroni and cheese. That's what I want.
KFC and mac and cheese. Hey, speaking of KFC, I'm hearing that in either the UK or in Europe generally, they're not only running out of chicken, but they're also completely running out of gravy, and it's all based on their change to DHL as their delivery source. Have you heard anything about this?
I did hear they're running out of chicken. There's not enough chicken in the UK, I think it is.
Gravy, too, Charles.
Are you serious?
I'm serious, and they're blaming DHL. What can DHL do for you?
Well, no, that was Brown.
Well, we think UPS sucks.
Well, but you know what? Amazon could probably come in there and fix it, as much as I hate Jeff Bezos, but that's another story. So let's talk about big corporations, Charles Ortel. You are an investment banker and asset manager, and you actually were one of the first people to say decades ago that GE was going down. Now, we're going to get to the Clinton Foundation in a minute, but we got two segments here. So let's start with that, Charles. GE, a blue chip stock, something my father made sure he owned decades ago, is actually on death watch right now.
Yeah, it's so what happened with GE, I got to GE and I got into this whole line of work being on television, radio and stuff by accident, honestly, because I'd taken some time off to get custody of my kids in 2002 and then to get them off to boarding school and college. And I was just living in upstate New York, really not caring at all about politics, business, or whatever, and having a good old time with my kids. When a couple of years into that, when you're not earning money and you've got private school tuition and stuff to pay for, I mean, you start running out of money, so you got to do something. And so around 2006, I thought, let me figure out whether I think just how overvalued is the market. And so I picked 25 large companies, multinational U.S. companies to study, one of which, of course, was General Electric. And I could figure out all 24 of them, but I couldn't figure out GE. And I nearly just said, it's a financial company, I'll ignore it, when a non-GE light bulb went off in my head. And and I said, actually, there's a simple way to look at GE. It's got this gigantic mess of a finance company, which really was astoundingly large. And it's got this whole other piece that supposedly is best of breed in industrial and services. So for the whole gigantic thing, they did financial accounts, and then for just the financial piece, they did financial accounts with lots of footnotes. And I said, well, why don't I subtract the financial accounts for the finance piece from the whole and see what I get? And that took a while, actually, to do it because there's so many numbers and assumptions and stuff, but I was able to do it. And to my shock and horror, what I saw was a disastrous financial business that didn't stack up. It was worse, in my opinion, then, and this is 2007-8, it was worse than CIT, which the market hated. And CIT had been a client of the firm where I worked, the first firm where I worked, which was called Dillon Reed. And, I knew CIT, and I could see that GE Financial's ratios and performance was far worse than CIT, and the market was, excuse this language, puking all over CIT. So when I saw that, and I figured, well, let's put a fair value on GE's financial business, subtract that from the market value of GE's whole, and let's see how overvalued the rest of GE is. And I saw that, the rest of GE, which you would expect, world beater in engines and locomotives at one point and this and that, all kinds of industrial stuff and services, but typically either 1, 2, or 3 in each of its major lines around the world, very big, AAA rated, no excuses for not being able to pay for management and consultants and lawyers and whatever. Its revenues were dropping, its profit margin was shrinking, its cash flow margins were in some cases negative. When you looked at it, U.S. versus international, the U.S. was losing money, international was, eroding. It just wasn't the picture of strength that everybody thought that it should have been. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that, actually when companies get to a certain size, they're not going to do much better than the growth in global economic activity, right? I mean, if you are a gigantic company, reach a point where you really can't grow as quickly as you used to. Yet GE was touting its double-digit earnings growth and this and that, and it all turned out to be just financial chicanery. So I went back, actually, I looked at this. I did a pitch, I won't say to which network, but I did a pitch at the request of somebody in the network in February of 2008. And I titled the pitch, Naked Emperor. And I have it. I saved it. And, I basically predicted exactly what was going to happen. I predicted that governments would decide in the end to support GE, And that's exactly what happened. Instead of letting GE go bankrupt in 2008-9 the way it should have, what happened was central banks around the world suppressed interest rates to very low levels. That inflated the values of all the assets of GE's balance sheet and made their debts easier to service. And then at the same time, our government and other governments, and Jeff Immelt, the CEO, was in charge of it. We engaged in a ridiculous stimulus program where we spent over almost $1 trillion, got nothing. We didn't even get a T-shirt. And so we treaded water for 10 years with this thing. And GE is, I think, the most widely held stock among American families. Many Americans own the stock, like you, Donna, because the dividend yield is so high. And, if your father, you got it when your father died, let's say, and you have hit your stepped up basis. But if you haven't, let's say, somebody like my dad who's 91, if he does not own GE, but if he did, he would have a very low basis in it. And so that means that if you want to sell, you've got a large tax bill. So the arguments I heard from many people in the 10 years were, oh, yeah, you're right, but if I sell it, I have to pay taxes, and I don't want to pay the taxes, and then I can't reinvest at the same yield, have missed the point that the only reason GE has been trading where it's been trading is these external forces that have kept interest rates low. And now under my friend and colleague from Dillon Reed, Jay Powell, who's the new central bank chair, he's going to have to raise interest rates. And I know I never would even ask for inside knowledge. I just know looking at, what's happened since he spoke earlier in February, the market's down like 1,500 points or more. People are growing to understand that interest rates have to go up. And when interest rates go up, GE's business tanks. And the thing that's really scary about it, and I'm an economic conservative. I've left the Republican Party. I'm certainly not a Democrat. But, you look at this, and it is not fair to pay people like Jeff Immelt and hundreds, if not thousands of executives, massive amounts of money to see the stock now be 14 or 15, whatever it is. And on September 7th, 2001, it was 40, and they didn't split. You shouldn't be paying executives. I'm sorry, I don't buy the argument that executives deserve multi-million-dollar compensation when the share price tanks. And furthermore, GE, I don't think has fairly stated its liabilities, its exposures for maybe tax and environmental, and they haven't topped up their pension plan to take care of their workers. That's still underfunded. When you're in that kind of mode and your stock price is not going up, you should not be paying a guy like this, the departed CEO, Jeff Immelt, $20 million or whatever he got per year. And you certainly shouldn't be flying these people around as if they're multi-billionaires. And, Jeff, I believe, was flying one main plane and a backup plane. And, of course, I don't think he was staying at a La Quinta Inn wherever he landed. I mean, probably living like the Sultan of Brunei, flying around the world. And that's just not right. And it sends a bad message. And I think the directors of GE, clearly have not done their job properly. Going way back, I think it's time to ask some very tough questions about, what was the condition of GE on September 7th, 2001, when Jack Welch left? Did he leave Jeff Immelt a perfectly humming, well-oiled machine, or were there problems in GE that had been covered up under the end of Welch's watch? And if so, why did Jack Welch deserve to leave with what is rumored to be about $1 billion worth of GE stock?
Wow.
I mean, I think this is an area actually where people who are not relying on GE advertising or GE bank business or whatever, across the spectrum on the right and the left, can look at this and say it's a cautionary tale. You make the big bucks as a sports figure. You make the big bucks, whatever your sport is, because you're taking on the toughest competition in a global match. In GE, same deal. You shouldn't be making $20 million to tank a company. And, it's outrageous. So I think what's finally happening, when I first started on this in 2007, I remember exactly the day, it was Valentine's Day, 2007, that I first approached somebody, other than, my kids, to talk about this. And I said at the time to the people, I said, look, if I go down this track of exposing GE in February of 2007, not having worked since July of 2002 for anybody, or at all, actually, there were one of two things would happen. I'd never work again because I'd be proven wrong. Or if I were proven right, we'd be having phone calls like this because I'd be doing interviews.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because obviously, Charles Ortel, from whence you speak when you look at these financial statements. And again, folks, you can find him at charlesortel.com. And we're going to get to his, as you can tell, he really knows what he's doing. And that's exactly what he's focusing on now with the Clinton Foundation and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, which is amazing. But are there other things? I mean, with what Barack Obama was doing with Solyndra and things of that nature, it seems to me like these public-private partnerships, and I don't know whether that's sort of along the same vein, but the government seems to be getting involved here to prop up these companies, and the only people that lose are the American taxpayers.
All right, well, wait a minute, Donna. Hold on. Charles, hold on a second. Before you respond to Donna's very good question and comment, I need to let you guys both know, as well as our beloved listeners, that while Charles was laying out that extremely impressive diatribe about his investigation into GE and what he thinks is going on, I, too, was doing a little bit of number crunching, Charles, and I need to let you know about this. Get your take on this.
Oh, no.
Because I started inputting all of the critical numbers needed that you, too, spent years dealing with. I keep coming up with pi, 3.14, and that's my answer, and I don't understand why I keep coming up with this. No matter how I work it, I end up with pi.
And not macaroni and cheese.
Not mac and cheese, 3.14, 15926 5359. Over and over again.
Millennials have no idea what you're talking about.
All right.
That's actually a great number, but the better number than pi is phi, P-H-I. Seriously.
You got a point there. All right, let's go back to Donna's very good question and get away from my stupidity.
What other GEs are there out there?
Well, you see, that's the thing. So with GE, the problem with GE is, it's funny. When I look at these type of things, I like to understand the risks that a business is taking. And the best place to find a statement of the risks that a business is taking is actually in the annual report of a company or a prospectus for a company if they issue securities. There's something called a risk factor section. One of the things that got my hackles up about GE, which should have had a very lengthy risk factor section because it's so complicated as a company and so many different industries and issues around the world, they took the position early in under ML of having very short lists of risks, try to lull people into a view that there's really no risk here. And that is a very risk-prone decision. Most lawyers will tell you, if you're trying to report to the public, that your risk factor section should be very long to protect you in the event that something does happen. So GE was right away, was risk-prone. So when you see a company that is not really particularly adept at finance, engaging in highly speculative financial activities like Enron, for example, that they were a pipeline company, but they decided they could get into these arcane financial trading strategies that ultimately sank them because they couldn't report it properly, and they were breaking a whole bunch of rules. When I see an industrial company getting too far afield into finance, it makes me nervous. So another one I'm nervous about, I think the industrial piece of Caterpillar is interesting. They're machines, but when I talk to my friends around the world in construction, they point out that now I think it's Korean and Japanese and even Indian companies are offering Caterpillar equipment gets beaten up by design. It's moving a lot of heavy earth and things around the world in hostile climate conditions. So, the argument that you want to pay a premium for a cat over, a lesser price for a lesser version that's going to get beaten up in both cases is not the strongest argument. And I actually wrote several articles. I've been proven wrong so far in cat. I've written several articles for different people called Why Cat is a Dog.
All right, well, while you're talking about Caterpillar and even my industry that I'm in, rock and roll buses, the entertainer sleeper coaches, could be affected by this new situation that Trump is proposing with regard to the tariffs. What, steel is used in making Caterpillar equipment. Steel is used in making the engines and the frames that are in the buses that we buy.
And aluminum
is used in the buses, and I'm sure in Caterpillar equipment. What effect do you think Trump's new tariff proposal is going to have on companies like Caterpillar, as well as companies like Star Coaches that buy the equipment that are made by these manufacturers that are buying steel and aluminum?
So I think that the problem we have with most of the financial punditry, and this is an interesting financial set of issues, is that they don't care about the facts. They don't look at the facts closely enough. The facts to understand this issue are contained in one great database called UNCTAD. You look at that. Look at the National Accounts Compendium for every country in the world from 1970 to 2016, year by year in dollars. And what you see, the reason it's very important to understand this is that the size of the market inside the United States, the amount of goods and services that we consume, is so much vastly greater than any other market. Forget the idea of a unified Europe because it's already falling apart. It never was unified. We are the single largest consumption market in the world. What does that mean? That means if you want to be a serious business, you've got to sell in the United States market. So most of these companies outside the United States need our market a lot more than we need China or India or any of these other, because the consumption markets inside those countries are tiny, still tiny, especially when you look at them on a per capita basis. We're the largest aggregate market in the world, but we're 1/4 the size of the population of China. So when you adjust it for that, you quickly appreciate that Trump is, on this one, it's maddening when he's right so often, but he's actually correct here. And, of course, the swamp is screaming because the swamp consists of all these lobbyists for the exporters into this market who desperately China needs American consumers a lot more than we need Chinese consumers. And as for the different projects, the investment projects in China and other places, I question how much money people really make building anything in China. And if you're doing it because you're General Motors and you're putting up a factory in China and you only own 50% of the business, or not 100%, how are you going to get your investment out of China? So relative to the rest of the world, I think we are a very, very interesting market, even with these tariffs. And, I think Trump, on this one, I think he's in the main right. Now, will some items end up costing more? Of course they will. But then you have to start thinking about the consumption patterns in this country. So we're a lot different in 2018 than we were in 1988 or 1968. So the population of people aged 55 and up is a far higher percentage of the total. As people age, they consume in different ways, and they actually consume less. So, a lot of these people who are just reflectively reacting, so, well, tariffs brought on the Great Depression in 1933. Yeah, 1933 was a slightly different time than 2018. I mean, you go back and you look at the size of the U.S. market versus the rest of the world back then, it was tiny.
Yeah, that's true. Charles, we're out of time for this segment, and I see what you're saying, and that does make sense. And, of course, now we've got automation doing so much more as well, which is a whole other thing. Boy, it's unbelievable, the financial mind of Charles Ortel. And we're going to come back after the break and talk about Sunday with Charles, your little, comedic attempt at some fun and jabs at what's going on in the world. And also you can find his information, folks, at charlesortel.com, CharlesOrtel.com. And again, we're going to get to his latest findings on the Clinton Foundation coming up next on Cowboy Logic Radio.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire.
Hi, thank you for listening. My name is Ron Phillips, and I'm the owner and operations manager of Talk America Radio. It is with great pride that I offer you this 24/7 stream of some of the finest talk radio programming in the country, but I need your support. We are a listener-supported network. That means we need your help to continue to offer the quality programming you're hearing right now. If you're able, please visit talkamericaradio.us and click the Support Us button. Your donation will go a long way in helping us continue to share the American voice. Thank you.
Hi, it's Mark Walters from Armed American Radio. For nearly a decade, I've been educating, informing, and entertaining responsibly armed Americans. And during that time together, we've shared some ups and downs, haven't we? Trump's election saved our Supreme Court and no doubt the future of our gun rights for now. But now is not the time to lay down. The enemies of freedom are well-funded and more determined than ever. To keep up with the state of your gun rights, make sure to tune in to Armed American Radio right here on Talk America Radio, the new dominant voice in conservative talk radio.
Donna, I sure miss listening to Neil Bortz every morning on my drive into Atlanta.
I know what you mean, Don. Talk about appointment radio. Neil Bortz was the morning jolt of reality and political incorrectness that millions of people needed to start their day.
You're so correct. When Neil retired, I seriously felt a major void in talk radio.
Well, no need to feel that void now, Don. Neil is available on demand with his exclusive and completely unfiltered podcast called Bortzcast.
That's right, Donna. Neil no longer is faced with dealing with the FCC. His Bortzcasts are unfiltered, politically incorrect, common sense. Think of it as Cowboy Logic Radio on steroids.
No, think of it as Neil Bortz on steroids.
I do stand corrected. Neil Bortz on steroids.
Ladies and gentlemen, go to connectpal.com/BortzCast and find out why Don and I are faithful subscribers to his podcast.
Donna, it's only $4.99 a month. $4.99 a month. Chump change to once again listen to Neil Bortz, my radio hero.
He's my radio hero, too. Go to connectpal.com/BortzCast right now. Sign up and experience Neil Bortz again like never before.
connectpal.com/BortzCast. Sign up today. This is Don Neuen, co-host of the Drive Time Sit Rep. Join me as I call in to my Intel analyst, Denise Simon, for my daily situation report, or Sit Rep, the Drive Time Sit Rep. Check talkamericaradio.us for more information and show times.
You're listening to your local news source, WLBB, News Talk 1330 and FM 106.3.
Hey everybody, they're back on again!
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts, when their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glare. Back when the West was really wild, Cowboys didn't dance.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio. I'm Donna Fiducia, along with Don.
Welcome back to Cowboy Logic Radio, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Don Neuen, and you're not. Back to you, Donna.
And he's Charles Ortel. And before Charles, we got so rudely interrupted by the break. Just finish your
I thought you were going to say rudely interrupted by me.
That too. That's the other
Hey, Charles, the last thing you were talking about was based on a question that I posed to you, and I appreciate the fact, first of all, of your, in my opinion, unsurpassed wisdom in these areas. But I really appreciate the fact that you feel that this is not going to be detrimental to guys like me and companies like the star coaches that I'm with. So that's a bit of good news.
But I want to get back to the fact that you know Jay Powell, the new Fed chairman. And I've said now for years, I think the Fed chairman is more powerful, really, one of the most powerful people in the world. Because with these interest rates, and like you're saying, they've been artificially low because I as somebody who isn't into finances like you are, Charles, but can see the last 8 years they basically printed money and tried to coddle Barack Obama's presidency, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. The interest rates have to raise, and that is going to start causing some problems. Can you just explain that briefly, and then I do want to get to the Clinton Foundation.
Sure. So, I mean, I know we worked together at Dillon Reed starting in the early 80s, and so we were both, very junior people and grew up together in the early parts of our career then, and we stayed in touch afterwards. And, I know Jay for now over 30 years, and he's a very thoughtful guy. From memory, he went to Princeton. He then went to Georgetown Law School. He had a career in the law, then he went into banking, then he went into politics, into the Treasury Department. And in my dealings with him in business, he's a thoughtful, studied, objective guy, and he's got a lot of business experience in business, and now also in politics. He's also made a lot of money, so I think he's the wealthiest Fed chair ever. I believe his financial statement said he was worth $70 million, and that's somebody he's not going to do something impetuous or rash. And he also has been on the board of the Federal Reserve prior to being made chairman. So he has experience, and I think a better kind of experience than these academic types, the Greenspans, the Yellens, the Bernanke. So I actually, I don't want to know anything about what he's actually doing now as Fed chairman, but based on my relationship with him over time, I have the utmost confidence in him. And I think, he basically was left with a bad hand of cards. Bernanke, I actually did a number of interviews over the years when he started with the quantitative easing. I said, the first time I said he should go to prison.
Yeah, Janet Yellen, useless in my book, but
yeah, exactly. And so the thing, when you look at statistics that are put out and there are a lot of them that are put out, but there are some excellent statistics that come out of the Federal Reserve. One is out of the St. Louis Fed, and it's called, I think it's the FRED set of statistics for some reason. And a great chart there is what's called capacity utilization. When you think about economists, Thomas Carlyle said, the famous guy, Scottish economist, I think he said, a philosopher, he said, you teach a parrot the words supply and demand, and you have an economist. The essence of economics is understanding, are there more buyers than sellers or the reverse? And in this economy, for decades, the United States economy, measured by the Fed, has been operating way under capacity, and the capacity estimate is easily gained. I mean, look at what we're doing. We're doing this interview now. We're not doing it from, some gigantic office building with people running around in the studio. We're just, doing it on the fly, and you're able to do a lot more with a lot less. So what's the real economy's capacity? It's probably even higher than these statistics show, and we're operating at less than capacity. What does that mean? It doesn't make sense to invest a lot when the entire economy is operating well under its capacity. So we've had a situation where there should have been creative destruction. The disruption that we see in the advertising agency and the retailing by Amazon should have been allowed to happen in government. Government needed to be disrupted. A lot of things need to happen, but instead, the sycophants to the deep state and to the establishment in both parties said, we got to make Barack Obama look good. We got to make this work. So let's keep interest rates low. Let's run these massive deficits. Let's game the system. Let's have these idiots pump out reports saying everything's working when the people who go, the people I really enjoy connecting with, I like to go out to breakfast in the morning, just have coffee and sit around. And you meet, people from different walks of life. And the ordinary person in America understands that America, for all that's happened under Barack Obama, is worse off, way worse off. Damn the statistics, damn the reports, damn the experts. We know it, and that's why there was so much enthusiasm for Bernie Sanders on the left and so much for Trump on the right. We know in this country that the experts don't know diddly in the main. The mainstream experts are captured. And, so we've got to go through and tear down, particularly in the Northeast, the Midwest, these cities that once had booming industries which no longer have them because of the failed policies, principally Democratic policies, big government, wasteful spending. These cities have to be restructured.
Drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. That really is the bottom line when you think about it.
But, I did a lot of work, for example, in Toledo, Ohio. Toledo, Ohio was once a great city. It's a mess, complete mess, because its policies reject businesses and employment. You got to change all that. And that's what Obama should have done, but he didn't do. Instead, he created this massive bureaucracy. Trump's tearing it apart. It's going to take a while to really get income growth consistently on a trajectory. But bad as things are in this country, Europe is far worse. China is in dangerous territory, I think, about to blow up. And, in all the mayhem that's going to ensue, we will seem like a safe port in the storm.
Yeah, look at Venezuela. I mean, where has socialism ever worked? And it's so funny how the left just stays quiet. The problem is Trump is undoing what their savior Barack Obama did, and that's what they don't like. And it's pretty obvious Barack Obama didn't have the best interests of this country in mind. All you have to do is look now at Iran and Syria and North Korea, and that kind of sums it up pretty well. All right, but Charles Ortel, you have been seen on just about every major news channel talking about the Clinton Foundation and what's going on. You said in previous interviews that $17 million disappeared from the Clinton Foundation, and you thought Penn and Teller were great magicians. This is before Hillary finished her first year as Secretary of State. Tell us, bring us up to date on what's going on with the Clinton Foundation, because as everybody just heard how you looked into GE and foretold its demise decades ago, the Clinton Foundation is almost a no-brainer.
The Clinton Foundation is not actually 1/1000th as complicated as GE. It's a very small. I mean, it's big. In an absolute sense, it's declared revenues of $2.4 billion. But GE had declared revenues approaching $150 billion at its peak, and a market value, including debt, approaching $1 trillion. I mean, it's a gigantic enterprise operating in many, many places, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pages of documents. So the problem with the Clinton Foundation is that it's a self-indicting mess that began on October 23rd, 1997, when the Clintons were in deep trouble. The Monica Lewinsky stuff was about to go public. and they were, got impeached in 1998 but not convicted in 99. They had no money. They actually were broke, and they had gigantic legal bills, and they had to pay all this stuff off. So in the early phase of the Clinton Foundation, while he was still president, they controlled the IRS, Department of Justice, and then once Gore lost, I think they were able to insert Lois Lerner into the IRS to cover off some of these problems. And something that should have been investigated, that was investigating beginning February 15th, 2001 by the FBI, the papers are there in the FBI vault for all of us to see, something that should have been caught was not caught. And who was leading that charge? It was Jim Comey, was the U.S. Attorney beginning of the Southern District beginning January 2002, and Bob Mueller was the head of the FBI beginning September 4th, 2001. So
the plot thickens, folks.
Yeah, they had a team there that was, and they spent 4 years not finding the obvious. And so the real questions here, as I've been saying in the very beginning, the real question is not, is this a fraud? It's the largest unprosecuted fraud in history, bar none, when you count all the affiliates. The serious questions are, why didn't the IRS get this? Why didn't the FBI get this across the line? Why couldn't they win indictments? Why couldn't they win convictions? Why are so many state regulators and foreign donors covering this up even now? So when I started on this, I realized it would be a long slog. I did not necessarily believe that Hillary would lose. I mean, I actually hoped she would lose, and fortunately she did lose. But I could well understand that Donald Trump, has got a lot to do and not so many people he can trust inside the government. So I felt that it was a much wiser thing for me to start pushing governments around the world through friends to take a hard look at it. And what has been happening is that, people watch the situation. It's frankly been helpful to my cause that GE is getting in more and more trouble, because people are saying, wait, the guy got it right about GE. So maybe we should listen to him about the Clinton Foundation. And so more and more governments are, and more governments are pushing along. And it's been publicly reported, I think, on January 4th in the Hill, that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney in Little Rock are indeed looking at the Clinton Foundation. It's been publicly reported many places that the great attorney, Joe DeGenevieve, and his wife, Victoria Tensing, are representing a whistleblower who has a lot of information and evidence that has already been shared that shows that that the Clinton Foundation was likely used as a conduit for illegal donations by foreign powers basically, starting in around 2009. So there's a gigantic record here, and people have been resisting because once you actually look at this, it implicates the Bush wing and the Republican Party. It certainly implicates the Clintons. And I've been starting to write for this friend of mine, Mark Tapscott, who's now with LifeSet, Laura Ingram's thing. And, you start to look at this and you say, well, this fraud was covered up under Bush, and it certainly was covered up under Obama. So, how many people knew about this thing, and instead of trying to expose it, said, we better cover it up? The people who made that decision are all guilty of conspiracy. And so, I'm actually thinking for my next piece of writing something that the person who really needs to be investigated here is not Trump, it's Mueller.
I know. That's what really gets me. You've got a guy, this is Captain Obvious here. I'm sorry. You've got a guy here who delivered uranium. Now, Charles Ortel, you told us about Uranium One probably 3 years ago. And of course, you see Hannity talking about it. I'm glad it's getting some leg here. But, I mean, this is crazy. Mueller actually delivered some of the samples of uranium to the Russians. And you're talking about having a Miss Universe pageant, and Russia having, Trump having some business dealings in Russia. I mean, give me a break here. This is it's just all I do constantly when I tweet is hashtag double standard.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely right. I mean, the thing of it is here that every single senior person in the Justice Department has a conflict of interest thinking about this investigation. I mean, Rod Rosenstein was the U.S. Attorney in Maryland from sometime around July of 2005 forward. And that was the jurisdiction in the office that didn't find the real problems at Ranbaxy. Yes, they got a $500 million judgment, but they didn't find the real problems. And Ranbaxy is now back in the spotlight in India and in Japan. There's continuing problems with the evil Singh brothers who, were the in quotes, brains behind the idea of letting adulterated HIV/AIDS drugs circulate around the world.
Explain that about Remboxy. Again, it's inferior drugs, and people essentially said, and this is what the Clinton Foundation said they were giving to the poor kids in Africa. Oh, we had these HIV/AIDS drugs made by this company, Ranbaxy, Ranbaxy, I believe is how it's spelled. But they actually knew the drugs were of poor quality and said, well, it's just a bunch of black kids, and it's just Africa, so who cares?
It's even worse than that. Believe it or not, it's even worse than that. The problem was, going back into the 1990s, that the cost of treating an HIV/AIDS patient was prohibitively high with brand drugs. So the Clinton administration resisted the idea of replacing branded product with generic drugs. And ultimately, an accommodation was reached where branded manufacturers were encouraged to sell their drugs in the United States, where the insurance companies and the taxpayers would pay the fancy prices. But the branded guys didn't want to try to distribute drugs and have treatment in these poor countries because there isn't enough investment in the poor countries. There aren't that many doctors. There's not enough electricity. There's not many hospitals. The infrastructures, the roads are horrible. And so it's a lot tougher. Even if you can get the medicine to the patient, it's just a lot tougher to treat people in these poor countries. So a deal was cut, I think. A backhanded deal was cut where Ranbaxy was allowed via the Clinton Foundation and three other big companies, two in India and one in South Africa, to sell these generic drugs to foundations, but like the Clinton Foundations, and to our AIDS program, PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. Taxpayers paid billions of dollars for faulty medicines that have been distributed around the world, and people don't want to admit that because it's rather embarrassing that not only we didn't do our due diligence properly, Republicans and Democrats, but worse, that people likely were killed because of this. And meanwhile, the Clintons are going around taking false credit, as is par for the course, for bringing the cost of HIV/AIDS medicine down when it had nothing to do with it. It started way before the Clinton Foundation was anywhere near the issue. Under Clinton, they resisted the idea in the first place. The first company to talk about doing this was Cipla, C-I-P-L-A, in India. And they had ideas about doing this, I want to say, as far back as 1998. So all Clinton did was, with his cohort, Ira Magaziner, is glom onto a program that others had in their mind well before. But, Ira Magaziner was the one who screwed up the whole health care reform under Hillary Clinton. He's a sloppy person, and he ran this thing into the ground. Did none of his filings properly. They're all false, materially misleading. They omit all kinds of important information, which I now have. And so anyway, lots of governments are seeing that. There's going to be a comeuppance, I think. And the scales have already tipped. It's not going to be, is this a problem? The issue is it's a massive problem. Who's going to get their money back first? There's only so much money in the world that can be gotten. And by the time we're done with this, the Clintons aren't going to have any money. So where are people going to get their money? And the answer is big donors like the Gates Foundation, who didn't do their due diligence and lent their name to this mess, encouraged governments around the world that it was okay. And so I think, we're going to see a real tipping here. People are going to finally, I hope, take seriously the idea of making sure that charities that operate, U.S. charities that operate internationally, do so lawfully in compliance with all laws, U.S., state, and foreign laws. Certainly the Clintons have not done this right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with Charles Ortel. You can find all of his work at charlesortel.com. We encourage that you visit and, if possible, subscribe to his site. If not, bookmark it so you can visit it frequently. Charles, a concern of mine, and I'm hoping that after I lay this out, you'll be able to put my mind at ease, is that, first of all, the wheels of justice, the wheels of politics turn almost so slow that they're in reverse. In addition to that, you've laid out here that the key players in this are enormous on the global stage. The Clintons, Bush, Gates, and, Obama. And I need for you, if you can, to put my little mind at ease that something actually will happen with this and will be the end result of the awesomely great work and hard work that you're doing, along with others. But I got to be honest, I'm concerned that the wheels of justice and the political wheels, along with the huge influence that these individuals have globally, that this could end up being procrastinated, delayed, moved in reverse, until, quite frankly, these people, especially the Clintons, who do not appear to be in very good health and are getting up there in age, could be long dead and gone before justice can be served. And please do your best to put my mind at ease on that.
Sure. Well, so I took this as a crusade, so I didn't start on this, haphazardly. I did a lot of checking and laying the groundwork, and a lot of people are working on this around the world. And there's a lot at stake here. I mean, why is Corinne Brown, an African-American 71-year-old congressman, now serving prison for 5 years over her role in an $800,000 charity fraud, and Hillary Clinton and Chelsea and Bill, why are they free living the high life? That's just not fair. So why I'm encouraged, you look at this, it is, the Democratic Party wants to embrace Hillary Clinton now. Good on you. I mean, you won't get one electoral vote in 2020 if you go that direction. Right. So, pull the pin on the hand grenade and eat them up, man. But so I think it is not, far be it from me to give advice to the Democrats, but I don't think it really makes a hell of a lot of sense to resist this and to support Hillary. On the other hand, you take somebody like Kamala Harris, and we're going to be raising the heat on her. She was the Attorney General in California. She should have prosecuted this. I contacted the Attorney General. I retained my correspondence. I contacted with them and the Attorney General in New York. They did nothing. Kamala Harris has got to stand up and be counted now and explain why she did not prosecute the Clinton Foundation when she was Attorney General. And we know Xavier Becerra, the current Attorney General, he is, the guy who hired the NEUEN brothers when he was working back in Congress. So, there's no hope for him. But Kamala Harris thinks she's going to be President of the United States 2020, 2024. She's going to have to answer these questions. Eric Schneiderman's going to have to answer these questions, and other attorneys general. So I think inside this country, it's taking a while because so many people will be embarrassed, convicted, losing money, etc. Out of the country, different story. There are, multiple teams, multiple countries looking at this, and they're really seriously, as they say in England, cheesed off, which means upset. They're really upset with this because the more you look at this, the more obvious it is that lots of people around the world, decided to look the other way at it, what is an obvious fraud, and may well have benefited by taking payments back from the Clinton Foundation. So it's if you're looking for an example of how best to root out corruption and drain the swamp, there is not because I'm working on it, but there's no better example I can see, save for perhaps the entire UN and every aspect of the UN. That is a bigger swamp than the Clinton Foundation, but I don't know that we'll be successful in reforming the UN any century soon.
No, I agree. And I also, for months, probably the better part of a year, I have expressed the concern that Kamala Harris is a threat. And I think she's a huge threat. And
Michelle Obama. I mean, the Obama Foundation is run very similarly to the Clinton Foundation in many aspects, but they're not touching Obama because a lot of people are even saying that maybe Michelle might want to run. Don said that years ago. I mean, that's scary because there's a lot of problems, I would think, in that aspect because people have so much invested in these big wigs and, the fish is rotten from the head down.
Well, I'll give a bit of credit to the people currently at the Obama Foundation who actually reached out to me. And I won't reveal with whom, but I had lengthy conversations with top people there, and they may have just been blowing smoke towards me, but I don't think so. They're really trying to fix the obvious problems at the Obama Foundation. Now, that's the people working the machinery. Does it make sense? I mean, we know from Ed Klein's book, and just it's obvious that one of the reasons there was tension between the Obamas and the Clintons is that maybe Michelle does want to be the first female president of the United States. And I do take your point that on surface level, you can imagine a scenario where we have a stock market crash and where Trump's policies don't seem to be working. And, you've got Hollywood and the media elites all lining up and say, don't you miss the Obama days? Wish we could come back to them. And you'll have Michelle. Well, I might. I mean, I'm not sure I want to do this, but maybe I'll do it. Yeah. You could see them thinking along those lines. But if they want to try that, they're off to a rocky start with the Obama Foundation. I mean, Michelle was quoted as saying that last few days that she wants to create thousands of me's, i.e., her replicas of herself, via the foundation. That is not a legitimate charitable purpose. And in fact, the Obama Foundation has as one of its purpose that it's a religion, and that's absurd. I mean, you can't get approved to be a presidential foundation as a religion. So the paperwork that got approved when Barack Obama was president and when the IRS was enthralled to him should never have been approved the way it was approved. And the reports that have been subsequently filed are indicting. So they're going to have to change their reports, and we'll see if they decide to do it. For their sake, for all his faults and for all Michelle Obama's faults, we have to admit it's quite something to have a country like ours where slavery was legal through 1865. Took a while. Then you have an unusual first African American president. And like him or not, he is, an historical figure that people will be studying through time. And
but we're racist. But we're totally racist here. Meanwhile, South Africa is confiscating white-owned property and not paying people anything for it. And that's happening right now, and nobody's talking about it. But Charles Ortel, we only have a minute left. Tell us about Sunday with Charles.
Sure. Well, I teamed up with this great guy, Jason Goodman, who's a Hollywood veteran, 46-year-old NYU film school graduate, and we try to do a higher quality podcast once a week or so. If you Google Sunday with Charles, you'll see it. It's on an organization, Crowdsource the Truth, that Jason created, and we have a lot of interactions with our audience. We're very helpful, feeding tips and following up. We've done, I think, over 65 hours of programming, and we typically get 20,000 views within 2 days or so of each broadcast, and it can go up to like 40,000, which is lengthy for a 2.5-hour show.
That's awesome. So if you just go on YouTube and you Google or you YouTube Sunday with Charles, it pops up?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay, and folks, you can find him at charlesortel.com as well. Again, Charles Ortel is the financial person who knows what's going on behind the scenes and has been targeting the Clinton Foundation for ages. So keep up the great work, Charles. We really do appreciate it, and we'll be checking back with you periodically, but I'm glad to see this is starting to get a foothold at least. Charles Ortel, find him again at charlesortel.com and on YouTube every Sunday, Sunday with Charles. And that wraps up another Cowboy Logic radio show. We want to thank you all for listening. I'm Donna Fiducia.
And I'm Don NEUEN, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great week, and God bless America.
Cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. Their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance, yes. When cowboys didn't dance, didn't wear designer shirts. When their hearts were filled with memories, their bodies filled with hurt. They would sit around the campfire and exchange a piercing glance, yes. Back when the West was really wild, cowboys didn't dance.
Check us out on the web at cowboylogic.us.